Hi, my name is Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and this video is about should you buy a printer now or should you wait? What's coming up? What's the printer market likely to be in the next year or so? I'm leaning here on a brand new Canon Pro 1100 17-inch printer, excellent printer. I'm in the process of doing some reviews and some videos about it. It's brand new, it's going to last for years. So if you want a Canon 17-inch printer, this is the one you'd get. You might, if you've got a good deal, consider the older 1000 because the differences are not necessarily that great. But what about new stuff that doesn't actually exist? Should you buy a printer? Should you wait? In general, the answer to this is always, if you need a printer, you need a printer, go buy a printer. Much like cameras, waiting for the next best thing is a bit of a mug's game really, because you're paying more for it. You might have to wait. Of course, once something's announced, doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be available immediately. This is going to take a month or two from when it's announced to when it's widely available. I know people are getting them, they are shipping, but you also have to factor that in as well. But anyway, let's go through Epson printers, Canon printers, ones I've looked at. I should say up front, no significant inside knowledge on this. If I did know about a new printer coming up, I'd quite possibly have signed an NDA on it, so I couldn't talk about it anyway. This, what I'm talking about here, is all stuff that supposition based on many years of looking at the printer market, in particular Epson and Canon. So, first of all, Epson's EcoTank ET8550 still gets my absolute best printer if you want to get a serious printer to get into printing. Why is that? Principally, it's a good printer. A3 Plus 13-inch, so quite a bit smaller than this, certainly a lot lighter. So it's, a smaller printer. Why do I think it's so great? It's because I know from years of hearing people what they want in printers and things, is that ink costs matter to people when they are learning to do printing. The key to getting good at printing is to do more printing. Much like photography, really. You want to be a better photographer? Take more photos. Almost always works. Likewise with printing. But the ink costs are what put people off. Now, I'll come back to Canon's ink tank printers a bit in a moment when I have a look at some Canon things. But in particular, the 8550, it has pigment black, it has dye, other inks. Now, I'll admit this was the printer which in the last few years of testing most surpassed my initial thoughts what I'd get from it. This was never going to surpass my initial thoughts because I know what I'm getting. I wasn't surprised by anything this does. The 8550 surprised me. And it's principally because of the cheapness of inks, or relative cheapness of inks, that makes it easier for people to experiment, even if you're just printing on A4 size sheets. By the way, this is just a color calibration sheet for this, that a part of the process I was doing for setting this up. If you're not worrying about ink costs, you're not worrying about doing a print, and you should always start off on relatively cheaper basic papers to get the hang of things. Now, if you're actually doing that with something like an 8550, you think, oh, I don't like this print. What about if I change something? Oh, does that look better? Does it look worse? That does it look better, and just as importantly, does it look worse, are key elements in learning how to do great prints and produce your own prints that you're happy with, that you want to put on your own walls. Of course, being A3 Plus helps because you can print 13 by 19, you can print longer as well, but 13, that's a nice size for most homes putting out prints. Of course, you will end up with a lot of prints. Storing prints, dealing with them, that's an entirely different matter altogether. But anyway, print. That 8550 is about 4 years old. Next year it'll be 5 years old. Now, in printer lifetimes, and printers always last longer than camera models, and certainly a lot longer than phone models, but printers are relatively stable technology, so things don't happen very quickly in it. We have pretty much plateaued in terms of print quality. which is why I said I wasn't surprised by this. For this to be vastly better than, say, the Pro 1000 which preceded it, then the Pro 1000 would have had to have been deficient in some way. It wasn't. It's an excellent printer. I reviewed it back in 2016, I believe. Canon have quite long printer lifetimes, and I'll come back to that in a bit when I look specifically at some Canon information. But anyway, what about ink tanks? What would I really like to see in a successor to the 8550? I'd like to see better paper handling. If I had to pick a weak area, it would be some aspects of the paper handling for better quality media in this particular printer. People say, will they produce a version with pigment inks? I don't, eventually perhaps. I don't think we're going to see a pigment ink version, because this printer, if you produce a pigment ink version on it, that treads very heavily on the territory of the P700. Now, P700, P900, pure pigment ink printers, but they still use cartridges. Now, the P700 has, I'm going to say, annoyingly small 25mm cartridges. The P900 only has 50mm cartridges. I think it should have at least 80mm cartridges like this. But, you know, that's how market segmentation is done. That's how these things work. But 700, 900, they're the step up from this. Both of those could do, in my mind, with better paper handling. So the P900, it's small, much smaller and lighter than this. It's a 17-inch printer. It was I think it was 2020 I looked at that. So that's getting on a bit. But Epson printers, like Canon printers, tend to last quite a while. So what would I like to see for the P900 replacement? Well, I'd like to see it more robust. I'd like to see better paper handling. The print quality is great, no problems there. They're going to stick with the 50mm ink cartridges, I would suggest. But how long have these printers been going? How long are they going to keep? Would I suggest, say somebody wanted a P700 now, would I say, oh, don't buy that, there's something better coming along? Absolutely not. The earliest I could see replacements is late 25, perhaps even 26. I don't see, and that's because I said at the start, I don't have any inside knowledge in this particular area. I don't see any significant printer announcements coming up in the next year. Certainly none this year, what's left of it, and I doubt, maybe towards the end of 25, quite possible, but not before that. So if you want a printer, if you want 17-inch, your choices are this, or let's say the P900. Now, P900 has a roll unit on it as well. The roll unit, I have my queries about. That, it is a tour de force in engineering design. I do not like the spindleless principle it uses. If I wanted a roll printer at that, and this doesn't do roll, does do long prints, which, process of testing. If I wanted a roll printer, I would go for the P5300 or 5370 in the US. Now, the 5300 is a nice print. It's based on the older P5000 chassis. It's rock solid. It prints very well. I have no problems with that. It's a printer I'd be happy using. I have, as I say, a P5000, which has the same mechanisms in it. That has a paper cassette. It has a roll holder. So, even, and I will be coming back to doing a comparison of 17-inch printers at some point when I've tested this more, because the 17-inch options are currently the P900, small, lightweight. This, not lightweight, 35 kilos, but excellent print quality, sheet paper handling, very good. Bit thirsty on the ink, perhaps, if you don't use it much. And the P5300, more expensive, but proper roll handling with a cutter, with a paper. You can see, from what I use, the choice is fairly simple because I like using roll paper with 17-inch. So that would skew what I want. But the 900 is convenient, it's small. So if you haven't got the space for something like this or the 5300, then you're going to look at something like that. But they all come with trade-off, and I'll look at that in more details when I do a specific P900, P1100, P5300 sort of shootout and see what's what. I can tell you right now, there will be no best. The answer will be, it depends on what you want. So each of them has their strengths. They fit different markets, and it's realizing that printers fit into different markets often helps explain some of the apparently random choices by printer makers. Now, I've kept for years, because although I've been doing the videos for a few years, I've been writing stuff on the Northlight Images website for over 20 years now. And I've got a printer timeline, one for Epson, one for Canon. And it's always very useful to have a look at printer timeline to see where a particular printer, how long it's run, what it was replaced by, and the general movements in it. And that gives you an idea of how long printer models last. Now, past performance is no prediction of future performance, as in finance, as in printer models, cameras, etc. These things, they do change with the markets. But you can use it to say that, as I said, I don't think we're going to see anything P700, P900 replacement until, let's say, late 25 or into 2026. So that's that one out. What else is likely for changing? Looking at bigger printers. Now, if you look at the P7500, now that's a really nice printer. I had that here, and because I haven't tested the latest Canon ones, this is still my choice for, say, a 24-inch printer. It filled this space. It's big. It's a hefty printer. This one needs regular use. All of these larger printers do. This is not one you do for just occasional use. Well, not unless you've got pretty deep pockets. But anyway, P7500, that's it. What's happening to those and the P9500, the 44-inch version? What's actually happening with these? I don't know. However, I would suggest, in looking at the mechanics, look at the P65 and 8500 printers. Now, these are lesser inks, but similar process. These are more production printers. The 7500 is more the sort of fine art style of ones. Now, this is from when I tested P8500. Surprisingly good for the 6-ink printer. Very good. You see that giant great print I've got on top of it. Black and white worked well. I would not be surprised to see next year, once again, maybe in 26, to see the next version of the P7500, let's call it P7800, in this sort of format. So a change into, because remember, printer manufacturers like commonality of parts. They like producing just one basic model for something that they can, of a component that can be reused elsewhere. So we've got that as a significant change. If you're looking at the fine art side of things, big prints, I would say that is a significant change. Whether that will come with any change of print head or anything else, I don't know. Or even a new ink set or whatever. That is, to be decided, as it were. So anyway, that's it. Apart from the very big stuff, and this is the P20500. 60-inch printer. I'm hoping to have a test of that later this year. Obviously that won't fit here because, well, you couldn't even get it in the house. That is, that's the printer I would have if I won the lottery. I would have one of those in a separate print annex, but that's unlikely to happen as well. So anyway, that's the state with Epson. What about Canon? Well, interestingly enough, I've kept a Canon timeline as well, and looking at that, it shows how long some models last. In particular, let's have this timeline doesn't cover the ink tank printers, which perhaps I ought to address first, because people said, I did a review of the G550. It's a very nice printer, but it's only A4. And generally, I say decent printers start at A3+. Now, it's not to say you can't get good printers, but they are few and far between. So the G550, are we going to see a 13-inch and a pigment ink version of that? I'm going to say very unlikely, because Canon, even more than Epson, likes to differentiate products to different markets. It likes to have, you can have this, but you can't have that in this model. You need to go up to the next model. Look at the range of options they've had in cameras over the years. Very similar in printers. The G550, problem I had with it, and I looked at it, was that I use Max for everything, and Canon don't provide a driver, printer driver for it that allows you to use proper color management. Effectively, on Max, the G series, like that, may be great ink tank printers, cheap inks, but color management is effectively broken. Now, I came up with a workaround, so I was able to get much better prints than I ever thought I was going to be able to get out of it. But that is a deliberate choice not to include that color management. That says firmly, this is a printer aimed at people who want to do lots of prints, want to print from phones and do stuff like that. This is not a serious printer. If you want a serious printer, this is not the one you are looking for. Move on to the 200, Pro 200, Pro 300. Canon are quite clear about that. You can see if you look at their range of printers that, you know, if you're in a certain area, forget some features. You're not going to get them. Now, I would like to see a G series expand. Yeah. Now, it's several years old, so there will be more. The G series, I mean, it shows its age. The tiny little LCD display on it is, if you've got eyesight like mine, unless you're looking at it in very bright light, it's difficult to use. Why did I even test it? Because with color, it showed potential with color management and profiling, but just you shouldn't have to do that. But obviously you're being moved elsewhere. As I say, looking at the timeline, I can tell that the 200, 300, they're 2020 machines, so 5 years. Canon likes to keep those printers going on for a bit longer. I suspect the 200 and 300 will carry on at least another couple of years. Because they are based on the previous Pro 100 and Pro 10, which became the Pro 10S when the networking was added into it, they are based on essentially the same printers. So in looking at a Pro 300, yeah, it's great. It's got those little tiny ink carts. They are, well, I say little tiny ink carts, they're relative to other stuff I use. It's got those little tiny ink carts. And I really, I look at that and I think they are thirsty on ink. Beautiful printers, both of them really good printers. Both of them, if you produce printers that size but made them ink tank printers, they would be my absolute #1 go-to. This is the printer to get. The paper handling, for example, which I've said is a slight weakness in the Epson ones, is great on the Canon printers. Make them ink tank printers and you have two absolute gems. The 200 is already the best dye-based printer you can get. If you made it an ink tank printer, it would be stupendous. If you made it a pigment ink printer with ink tanks, well, you're going to hit so many other areas of Canon's printer area that you move into a different division and there will be frictions and it ain't going to happen. So that is, much as I would like to see higher end ink tank printers, I'm going to say we might just get next year an A3 Plus version, 13-inch version, but I wouldn't hold your breath. And if they bring that out and don't do a proper driver for it, that will be a shame. There will be a lot of people complaining about that. What about, and I say, looking at the timeline here, what about bigger printers? Well, the 2600, 4600 were only announced this year. This was only announced a few months ago, so there is going to be nothing higher end for Canon. There's going to be no significant changes for the 2600, 24-inch version, 44-inch version, or this. There'll be, firmware updates and whatever, but these are definitely here for years to come. So if you want one of the black printers here, the 1000 was black, this one is dark grey. There's a difference between them apparently if you put them next to each other. But if you want a Canon printer like this, go ahead, buy it, because nothing to replace this is coming in any time. The area where replacements may happen is going to be in the ink tank printers. There may be some low-end cartridge-based printers. I don't know. I don't really track that sort of printer very much. But so what have we got? No new printers this year. That's 2024 until 2025, possibly later on. I think you're going to see more from Epson in the next year or two than you will from Canon, although Canon might do something in the ink tank printers. I really hope that Canon surprises me and comes out with a great ink tank printer that I can recommend to choose between, say, that or the 8550. Because at the moment there is nothing to get close to the 8550 if you're concerned about ink costs, and I know that many people are. Some people have the luxury of not being concerned about ink costs. That's for people like this. This is a quality printer. The 5300 that I looked at, 5370 in the States, that's a quality printer. 17-inch is a nice size for printers. Well, it's a nice size for printers unless you want to print greetings cards and stuff. Now, greeting cards is something that I do look at occasionally with smaller printers. And essentially, once you get to bigger printers, this and larger, if you want to do greetings cards, you have to print multiple ones on a sheet, then cut it up and crease them. Because single feeding of small sheets is not what these big printers are for. You want that, you want one of the smaller printers, and then you're stuck there just feeding them in, and it just takes ages. I've got lots of stuff looking at the business sides of printing for this, not commercial print, but printing for artwork and stuff like that. So have a look. There's a massive index of all my videos, which I put a link to in the notes. But if you've got any questions, let me know. But as it stands, if you want a printer, buy a printer. And that's it. Hope that's been of help. Thanks for watching, and bye.